What up, y'all? Forgive me for being late, but today I'm giving you my full guide to the Salvation's Edge raid. Hope you enjoy. The first encounter is called Substratum and has no boss fight at all. The goal of Encounter 1 is to dunk multiple buffs, which the game calls Pyramidal Resonance, into a golden glowing chest in the middle of the main room of a circular maze. The Pyramidal Resonance buffs look like small glowing pyramids, and your team will be generating them when repeatedly running from room to room in a maze. When enough buffs have been dunked into the golden glowing chests, the encounter is over. Launch the encounter by dunking the first pyramid buff, which the game gives you for free, into the chest. Two random doors will suddenly open, and Supplicant Vex will flood into the main room. Always be sure to be extra careful and not let them detonate on you. Separate your team into two groups of 3 players, and when the Vex are dead, each team should run through one of the doors that just opened. One door will always open up in the middle of a wall, and another door will always open up in the corner where 2 walls meet. Just to save time, you could designate one team to always go through the corner door and the other team to always go through the wall door. Continue killing Vex in the room when you enter. Killing certain Vex will trigger certain things. For example, killing a Vex Hydra called Keeper of the Monolith will open another door leading you to the next room, but only for the other team, meaning both teams should be slaying out hard and prioritizing the Hydra to ensure their teammates can move on to the next room. Eventually, one of the 2 teams will encounter a Vex Overload champion. When it's dead, you'll see a message on your HUD that reads you are beckoned towards the center. Anytime you see this message on your HUD, all players should stop what they're doing and look for a new door to open that will lead you back to the center room. You won't have to backtrack through other rooms that you came through, by the way. Whatever room you're in at the time when that message pops up will have a way back to the center room. Think of the entire map as a big circle. You'll never be far from the center room. There will now be a Tormentor in the center room who you should all gang up on and kill. When dead, 2 more doors will open up, and like before, supplicants will flood in. Kill them from a safe distance, and again, maintaining the same 2 teams of 3, head through both of the open doors and do the same thing one more time. Kill all the Vex, prioritizing the Hydra in particular to ensure doors open for the other team. One team will kill an Overload Minotaur, and you'll be called back to the middle to kill a second Tormentor. When the second Tormentor is dead, each team should head back through the doors to roughly the same area they were in before they went to the center room. Your new goal will be to learn the plate mechanic, aka bouncing a signal back and forth between 2 orange-looking plates, which you may have noticed when you were running from room to room. Each room contains 1 plate, and each plate is connected to another plate via a long orange cable that runs along the floor from room to room. You should first find the active plate. Each team should have 1 active plate between their 3 rooms. You'll know the plate is active because it will be glowing noticeably. Stepping onto the plate will send out a charge along the cable on the floor in one of 2 directions. The direction the charge goes indicates the direction of the other plate your team will need to go to in order to ping pong the charge back and forth. At this point, your team of 3 should separate even further. Ideally, one Guardian should be positioned near the active plate, and another Guardian should be positioned near the other plate in the next room. You know, the room where the active plate's charge went off to. The third Guardian should be a floater between the 2 rooms, helping with ad clear as needed. When both plate players are in position, have the first player step on the active plate to send out a charge towards the second plate. This is important. The player near the second plate should not touch their plate at all until the charge has completely gone into the second plate and you see it begin to light up. When that happens, you now have a limited time to step onto the second plate and send the charge back to the first plate. Again, if you step on the second plate before the charge enters it and the plate lights up, or if you're too late, you will break the ping pong chain and have to start over. Every time you break the ping pong chain, the game will punish you by spawning in a subjugator, so be sure that the 2 plate players are communicating actively. Ideally, say something like charge sent or whatever you prefer. Each time you bounce a charge back and forth between 2 plates, you will spawn multiple pyramid resonance buffs between the 2 rooms. Again, the little glowing pyramid thingies that drop on the floor. You'll have to look around your room a bit to find where they are, but the good news is they spawn in set locations, meaning eventually you'll just know where to look. The max number of pyramid buffs you can pick up is 3. Grab any more than that and you will die. Picking up an additional pyramid buff will completely reset your timer of how long you have to dunk them before you die. Ideally, each member of the team should be picking up 3 pyramid buffs total. Each team should should continue bouncing the charge back and forth between their two plates until this has been done. Before returning to the center room, which we'll cover shortly, you need to successfully end the game of plate ping pong, which is done by locking up a large totem. Between the two active plates, you'll notice that one totem should look like this, open and with a little glowing pyramid symbol inside. That is the totem that you'll need to lock up, and each team will need to lock up one totem. To lock the totem up, wait for the charge to come back to your plate. Then do the following. Shoot the glowing totem triangle and then step on the plate, but only step on the plate after the charge has entered it, aka how you'd normally step on the plate when sending the charge back. So again, shoot the totem, wait for the charge to enter the plate, and step on the plate. Don't shoot the totem way too early. This should all happen relatively quickly, and if done correctly, the totem will now look like this, glowing all over and closed, indicating it has been successfully locked up. You'll notice that locking up a plate will cost you one of your pyramid charges, i.e. if you had ×3 pyramid buff when you lock up a totem, you'll now be knocked down to ×2 buff, but that's okay. When all players have ideally 3 buffs each, lock up both totems and head back to the center room. It's important to remember that some pyramid buffs will actually be spawning in the middle room as opposed to in the 2 plate rooms, just something to keep in mind when the team is gathering buffs. It's also okay if not every player has ×3 charge. It really won't be the end of the world. In short, buff up as much as you can, lock up both totems, and kill everything there, including the big bad yellow bar. When they're all dead, gather around the golden chest and dunk all of your buffs. Doing so will add additional time to the final shape is looming timer at the top of your HUD, which if it ever reaches 0, your team will wipe. As you probably guessed, more buffs dunked equals more time added to the final shape is looming timer. That is why it's important to gather and dunk as many pyramid buffs as you can. Important note, the golden chest where you dunk is extremely finicky and annoying. Sometimes you have to inch to the left or the right a little bit in order for the game to even give you the option to dunk, and on multiple occasions I've begun the dunking process only for the game to deliberately interrupt my dunk. This will also happen in the next encounter, so always triple check that you have successfully dunked because the chest is actual garbage. After you've all dunked, rinse and repeat from the top until the encounter is over. The next encounter is Dissipation, and your first boss encounter. Your goal of the encounter is to kill the Herald of Finality. The encounter is split up into the following areas. You've got the left side, the right side, the middle side, and the pit. Players should split up into 3 teams of 2. 1 team on the left, 1 on the right, and 1 in the middle. I'm gonna say right now, the left side, aka the one with the tall tower, is by far the most challenging side. So players who are either confident in being able to move quickly or are more experienced raiders should try to take the left side if they can. Shoot the Taken Blight in the pit to launch the encounter. Adds are going to spawn into all 3 sides of the map. Do your best to mow them down quickly. When your side's first ad wave is dead, a second wave will spawn in, including a chunky mini boss. Again, do your best to kill all of these as quickly as you can. About around this time, be sure to pay attention to the bottom left of your HUD, as you're going to get text indicating that the Herald is summoning you to battle. 3 players will be summoned total, and if you miss that notification, that's okay. You'll know you've been summoned if you also have text at the top of your HUD that says Call to Reckoning. When your side is clear of ads, the 3 players who have the Call to Reckoning text on their HUD should head down to the pit, and when all 3 players are ready, go ahead and jump in together. It's not the end of the world if a player summoned to battle jumps into the pit early, but ideally all 3 players who have been summoned to battle are in the pit together around the same time. When in the pit, your goal isn't to truly begin DPS on the Herald, but rather to shoot his head until it kind of does a sparkly shield pop. When it does, all 3 pit players will acquire a new buff called Stolen Favor. More on that in a minute, but in the meantime, you may notice that you're not even able to shoot the Herald's head in the pit. If the Herald has this icon above his head, that little mini blight, that means that there are taken blights up in the air around the arena that first need to be shot and destroyed. This is what the other 3 players who were not called down into the pit should be focusing on. If they can see from afar or are told by the pit players that blights are up, look around in the air for any blights and destroy them. I believe each side of the map can potentially have 2 blight spawn locations, and blights can also spawn in the pit with the Herald. When the mini blight symbol is gone from the Herald's head, it means that all the blights are gone, and the pit players can feel free to start shooting and breaking the Herald's head. When his head has become vulnerable, been shot, broken, and all 3 pit players have acquired the stolen favor buff, they should now leave the pit and head back to their side. Important, when the pit players are heading back to their side, they should look at the totem near the front of their side as they return. Yes, like the first encounter, there are plates and totems. Each side of the map has 2 plates and 1 totem, and now that the totems are open, only the players with the stolen favor buff will be able to see what the true shape inside the totem is. Players without the stolen favor buff can look at the totem but won't be able to tell what the true symbol inside is. Unlike the first encounter, which was only pyramid, the symbol in the totem will now either be a pyramid or a sphere. The shape in the totem indicates what kind of resonance buff you'll need to successfully close that particular totem. Don't worry, I will elaborate on that in a minute. Now, like the first encounter, each team is going to be playing another game of plate ping pong. Every side has 2 plates and 1 totem. Go ahead and decide before the encounter begins which player on each team will be on which plate. And when you reach this part of the raid, get to your plates and begin sending the charge back and forth like before, beginning with the back plate. Each time you do, you'll spawn resonance buffs around the area like the first encounter, except now the buffs will be either a little pyramid or a little sphere. The locations are again predetermined, so in time you'll learn where everything is. Grabbing a pyramid like before will give you pyramidal resonance, but grabbing a sphere will give you spherical resonance. If you pick up one type of buff, then the other, you'll still have 2 stacks of resonance, but the type of resonance you have will be updated to the most recent buff that you've grabbed. For example, if I first grab a sphere, I'll have spherical resonance times 1. Then I grab another sphere, but then after that I grab a pyramid, meaning I now have pyramidal resonance times 3. Do you see? It still goes from times 1 to times 2 to times 3, but the type of resonance just updates to whatever the most recent buff you have grabbed is. So remember how stolen favor players can see the true shape of the open totem? Again, whatever that symbol is, that's the type of resonance buff you'll need to successfully lock up that totem. So if it's a sphere, lock up the totem the same way we did in encounter 1, but be sure that you have spherical resonance when you do. If it's a pyramid, be sure that you have pyramidal resonance when you do. Reminder that the player with stolen favor does not need to be the player who locks up the totem. They just need to be able to identify what shape is needed to successfully close the totem. When players are playing plate ping pong, you can do it one of 2 ways. You can either grab only one type of resonance each the entire time, aka one player only grabs pyramidal and one player only grabs spherical. I found that to be fairly easy to do in the middle area of the encounter in particular. Again, resonance buffs spawn in set locations, and I found it was easier to pick up one type in the middle area. Or you could just grab 2 of either resonance and make sure that the third and final resonance you grab, if you're the totem closer, is the one you need to lock up the totem. Meaning, if you need orbital to close the totem, you could, in theory, grab 2 pyramidal buffs first, but then grab an orbital, which would put you at times 3 orbital. Either strategy will work, so do whatever feels more comfortable for your team. Like encounter 1, if you botch the plate ping pong mechanic for any reason, the game will punish you, this time by spawning a yellow bar mini boss, so try to avoid that if you can. When every player ideally has times 3 resonance buffs, and also the totem closer has times 3 resonance buffs and the correct type of resonance required to close the totem, then again close the totem by waiting for the charge to go into the totem plate, shooting the symbol in the totem, then standing on the plate in a timely manner. Then all players should rush down into the pit where you'll find a golden chest like in encounter 1. Dunking your resonance buffs into the chest will extend the final shape looming wipe timer at the top of your HUD, and now it'll be damage time. Remember that all raids apparently have surges by default now, so when choosing what you want to use for DPS, be sure to double check what the active surges are for a free 25% buff to your outgoing weapon damage for that element. When DPS is over, all players return to their sides and take it back from the top. When you've either done 3 damage phases on the Herald or you reach the last gated bit of his health bar, he'll enter final stand mode. 3 taken mini bosses will spawn in the pit with you, but honestly you can just ignore them. Continue damaging the Herald until he is dead. Your biggest challenge will likely be getting to the chest on time and dunking with enough resonance to extend the timer long enough to keep the fight going for more damage phases. Try to make sure that all players are ideally getting times 3 resonance before dunking to extend the wipe timer as much as you can. Final note, usually one player from each side of the map will be called to battle into the pit, but sometimes the game is weird about it and calls 2 players from one side and 0 from another. At the end of the day, if one side has no one who gets called into the pit, that's okay, just as long as one person with the stolen favor buff can quickly look over at that side's totem to correctly identify the required shape needed to close that totem. Again, you don't need the stolen favor buff to close the totem, you just need to know the correct shape. The next encounter is Repository, aka the third encounter. This encounter does not have a boss fight, but there will be plenty of tormentors and subjugators along the way. There will be 3 rooms total in the encounter that your team will all conquer one at a time. Your overall goal of the third encounter is to play games of plate ping pong in each room and successfully close all 3 totems in each room, one room at a time. When you've closed all 3 totems in the final room and kill all enemies in the room, you'll have completed the encounter. Starting back in the first room, there will be 6 plates total and 3 totems near the far end of the room that all need to be closed. Players should divide into 3 teams of 2 and decide in advance which team will take which set of plates in each room. Here is a very general layout of all 3 rooms of the encounter in terms of where the plates and totems are located. As you can see, the first room is very straightforward. All the plates are basically connected in a straight line. In the second and third room, though, not so much. Again, decide in advance which plates you and your partner will be responsible for in each room. Begin the encounter by dunking the resonance buff that the game provides you into the golden chest. Ads will flood the room. Deal with them as best you can, but take note that at the far end of the room, 3 tormentors will spawn. Whoever gets the final blow on a tormentor will get the stolen favor buff. Again, this buff will allow you to see the true symbol inside the open totems, and like the second encounter, you'll need the correct type of resonance in order to properly close the totems. Therefore, one player from each team, ideally the player who will eventually shoot and lock up the totem, should be the one getting the final blow on one of those tormentors. If they don't, it's not the end of the world. Just make sure that the 3 totem players at the far end of the room let each other know what type of resonance each totem needs in order to be closed. Again, ideally though, you're letting one player from each team get the final blow on one of each tormentor. Each team should then begin playing plate ping pong like before. Bounce the charge back and forth several times, which will spawn resonance buffs throughout the entire room. Here's where things get tricky though. There's now going to be a third type of resonance buff, hexagonal, which I've also heard people call cube to make it easier. Use whatever call out you want, I don't really care. Like before, resonance will spawn in set locations throughout the room, but your totem symbol is determined by RNG, meaning, for example, if you're trying to lock up the far right totem in room 1, which requires hexagonal resonance to close, and hexagonal resonance spawns on the far left side of the room, you're gonna have to do some goddamn cardio. Going back to our original map and layout of the room, this is a general idea of where each type of resonance will spawn in. This is not an exact pinpoint location. We'll get to different strategy variations in a minute, but for now, know this. Whereas in Encounter 2, it's very likely that you'll be able to consistently lock up your totem without breaking the chain and the game punishing you by spawning in a mini-boss, in Encounter 3, this will be borderline unavoidable, but that's okay, it's just how things are. Usually, it goes like this. Step 1, kill tormentors to identify the symbol in all 3 totems. Step 2, begin plate ping pong and spawn resonance throughout the room. Step 3, everybody gets off their plates and runs around the room grabbing the resonance buffs they need. Again, the inevitable totem closers should be making sure that the final resonance buff they grab matches the symbol they need to close their totem. To repeat, subjugators will likely spawn in during step 3 because while you're running around grabbing resonance, you're likely going to break the ping pong chain. Again though, that's okay because it's essentially unavoidable in this encounter. Step 4, kill all the subjugators so that the totems can reopen again. Step 5, begin one final round of plate ping pong so that the totem closers can successfully close their totems. Okay, strategy wise, I've seen this done one of 2 ways. Either 1, totem closers will run to whatever side of the room they need to in order to grab the type of resonance buff they need, then run back to their totem and close it when they can, or totem players will grab whatever type of resonance buff is closest to them, and then based on what type of resonance that is, they now just go to whatever totem in the room requires that resonance to close and then close it. Both strategies are definitely a little bit hectic, but I think I do prefer the former. Be sure to decide in advance which to do with your team, whichever you find easier. When the totems have been successfully closed, all players should meet up at the golden chest, which should now have spawned near the middle of the room room and dunk their leftover resonance into it to extend the wipe timer like before. When you've done that, kill all the ads and head to the far end of the room to head through the door into the next room. In the very final room, the dunk chest will be closer to the far end of the room rather than the middle like the first two rooms. Again, when you do this for all three rooms, encounter over. Final note, during the encounter, turrets will occasionally spawn up on high platforms. It's really important to gun these down whenever you see them because they can F up your progress a lot. You should also take care to avoid the witness's hands and arms coming out of the walls. Those will really hurt you too. For encounter 4, I've done something that I rarely do. Because the fourth encounter is so complex, I've made an entirely separate guide for how to do it, which I'll link down in the pinned comment. Not to toot my own horn out here, but the feedback I've gotten on that video is really positive. Go check it out. Again, I will link it in the pinned comment. I know it seems complicated, but after watching that video, you will understand. Encounter 5 is the final encounter of Salvation's Edge, and your goal of the encounter, naturally, is to defeat the witness. In order to reach DPS phase, you'll first have to break 6 buttons on the witness's big coat. These buttons are referred to as glyphs in the game, and in order to break all 6, you need to first acquire the Glyph Breaker buff. When the encounter begins, ads will spawn in everywhere on repeat. Try your best to kill them. Most teams will divide into 2 roles, 3 players on the Glyph Breaker role and 3 on ad clear. Ad clear people can go to town and try to stay alive. Meanwhile, Glyph Breaker people, you're on the lookout for the witness's arms, which will be repeatedly popping out of thin air to attack your fire team in one of 3 different ways. There's the arm that comes down from the sky, which will mark an area somewhere on the floor. It's attacking with a triangle. I want you to associate the arm itself with a triangle and the color green. I'll explain why shortly. There's an arm that comes up out of the ground, which will mark an area on the floor. It's attacking with a circle. For now, I want you to associate that particular arm with a circle and the color gold. And finally, there is a hand that comes out of thin air horizontally and will fire a laser attack in a straight line. I want you to associate that particular arm with a square and the color red. For the 3 players on glyph duty, start off by assigning each of them one type of arm to deal with, aka one player will handle breaking the triangle attack arm, one player will handle breaking the circle attack arm, and one player will handle breaking the square attack arm. In order to break the arm and acquire the Glyph Keeper buff, a player must do the following things in the following order. And don't worry, I will give an entire example. Step 1. Step into the direct path of the attacking arm you're in charge of inevitably breaking and shoot the golden band on that arm. When you do, it'll pop and flash a color and a symbol. The color and symbol indicate what type of resonance you need to now go and acquire. Step 2. Go and acquire that resonance by standing in the attack zone of whatever shape and symbol was indicated on the broken armband. You'll have to stand in there for about 1 second to get the buff. Step 3. Return to the arm you're in charge of breaking, stand in the path of the attack again, and shoot the armband. The arm will now break and freak the hell out, indicating you have both done your job in breaking the arm and also you've acquired the Glyph Keeper buff. If you wish, you can now shoot and break one of the buttons on the witness's coat to officially break that glyph. Some teams may wish to do this 1 at a time, 2 at a time, or 3 at a time for cleansing purposes, which I'll get to in a minute. Okay, for example, I'm in charge of breaking the circle arm. The encounter begins and I look around for the circle attack target on the floor. I run into the attack pattern and shoot the circle's armband, breaking it. I notice it has flashed green. Remember, green is the triangle arm. That is the game telling me I need to go and acquire the triangle buff, aka pyramidal resonance. I look for the triangle attack target on the floor, go stand in it for about a second until my buff becomes pyramidal resonance. Now I go back into the circle attack target on the floor and shoot the arm equipped with the pyramidal resonance buff, and boom, the arm breaks and freaks out and I get the Glyph Breaker buff. When standing in the path of an arm attack to shoot and break the armband, you ideally want to do this as fast as you can, in and out. Reason being, standing in the path of the attack for too long will give you resonance stacks, and like the rest of the entire raid, if you ever get more than ×3 resonance, you will die. There are ways to cleanse yourself of all resonance stacks, which I'll go over now. The main way to cleanse is at the beginning of the DPS phase, where your entire team stands on the middle plate and gets elevated up. You'll all be cleansed then. The other way to cleanse yourself is to stand on the DPS DPS plate while any player shoots and breaks a glyph. You can even stand on the plate when you yourself break a glyph, and you will cleanse yourself. Again though, minimize the amount of stacks you gain by being as quick as you can when shooting and breaking the armband both the first and second time. When shooting and breaking the arms, there's one extra important mechanic we have yet to go over, being tested by the witness. When arm breaking, one arm when broken will not only freak out but glow extra gold all over, as well as have a unique sound cue. You have to be on the lookout for this at all times when on arm breaking duty. When it happens, it means the witness is about to throw you a surprise wipe mechanic, which you have to take care of immediately. After the extra gold glowing freakout arm, floating targets will appear in the sky in front of the witness. Depending on which arm went gold when it freaked out, your team will now have to shoot and break the correct targets where the remaining unshot targets will form a specific shape. There are 3 shapes you can form: a square, a triangle, or a circle. Which shape you need to form is determined by, again, which arm freaked out extra and turned gold when it was broken. If that is the square arm, you must form a square. If the triangle arm freaked out extra hard, you must form a triangle, and if the circle arm freaked out extra hard and went gold, you must form a circle. Again, you're shooting the extra targets so that the remaining targets in the air are what forms the shape. This image should show you what I mean. You're going to be shooting the black targets in each example to make sure that the remaining unshot targets form the desired shape. Here's an example in action. My team was doing glyph breaker duty when a teammate called out that the circle arm, aka the arm that does the circle attack on the ground, freaked out and went gold. The targets appear in the sky, and I begin shooting the extra targets to make sure that the remaining targets form a circle. We pass the test. After the test, the witness will fire out an attack that everyone in the fire team will need to completely jump over. If you don't and get hit by it, you will die. Failing the witness's test will make everyone in the fire team suppressed and therefore unable to jump, aka a total team wipe. Alright, when all 6 buttons on the witness, aka the glyphs, are shot and broken, damage phase can begin. Jump over to the platform right in front of the witness, and when it lights up, shoot the glowing triangle in his chest as much as you can. As you can imagine, Celestial Nighthawk Hunters and Celestial Still Hunt will go very hard here. During DPS, the witness will occasionally barrage you with attacks. The entire team should be on the lookout for these and ideally call out the direction the team should run to avoid the attack. For example, I'm damaging the witness and see during damage phase that the area in front of me is glowing orange. It's about to be attacked. Somebody calls out front left and we all run that way to avoid the attack. After the witness does his first attack, the very next one will be from the opposite direction. So if we just ran to the left, I know that the very next attack will require me to run to the right, which I do. The witness's final type of attack is a full-on wave that covers the whole plate, which you'll need to jump over. As long as your team is on the lookout for incoming attacks, calling out which way you should run, either left, right, or to just jump straight up, you should be a-okay. You'll know when damage phase is ending because the witness will begin winding up a big attack. You ideally want to get the hell out of there before that attack lands, as if it does, he'll launch you really far and probably kill you. After damage phase, rinse and repeat from the top. The witness will have a final stand attack when you reach the final health bar, but it's nothing out of the ordinary. Dodge his attacks and hit him with your very best damage. GG, no re. If you have any tips for your fellow raiders, let me know down in the comment section. Thanks very much for watching. Peace!